Yeah, so I'm Ross Brown, and I'd like to welcome you to this morning's Cyber and Serial webinar. Cyber insurance, getting the cyber insurance policy that's right for your business from the Southwest Cyber Resilience Centre. And also, we've got members from the Cyber Resilience Centre for Wales, which is a bit of a first for us. So you're also very welcome. For those watching who haven't already joined us, membership is absolutely free. And it's really easy to join. Just go to our website, www.swcrc.co.uk, and complete the application. It really is that simple. And obviously, for those of you who are living and working in Wales, exactly the same thing is it's www.crcw.co.uk, so you can join your respective centres. You'll then benefit from our customer journey, monthly newsletter, as well as podcasts and webinars such as this one. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat and ask them live on the Q&A at the end of this presentation. As I say, can you also make sure that your mic's on mute? Otherwise, the Zoom picks up you and then displays your full screen. So the safety and security of private or sensitive data is high on all businesses' agendas, with cyber intrusions becoming more common. Ensuring you have enough protection, staff awareness in line with best practice will help you make your business more resilient against attack. From encryption and phishing to ransomware and social engineering. So we're fortunate, to be joined today by John Clark from Aviva. John is a technical underwriting manager with Aviva with considerable experience in the field of cyber insurance. He worked for a global brokerage supporting clients' cyber risk management practices, and he recently joined Aviva to support their expanding cyber insurance proposition. John, you're really, really welcome, and thank you for giving us your time this morning. I'm really keen, as I'm sure our listeners are, to hear what you have to say about getting cyber insurance right for our businesses. So if I pass over to you.
Thanks very much, Ross. It's a pleasure to be here, everybody. This morning, I just want to go through, excuse me, I just want to go through cyber insurance in general. It's not too Aviva-fied, don't worry. About 10% of businesses in this country hold a cyber insurance policy currently. So there's still large swathes of organisations who don't have any sort of cover whatsoever. And the real kind of key message is how it can work alongside your own risk management practices as well. So I've got a short presentation, so I'm going to share that now. It has also been adapted from another presentation, so there are some kind of funky transitions going on, so just bear with me whilst I go through each slide. But what is it? What is cyber insurance, firstly? In a nutshell, it is to protect against cyber attacks. It's called cyber insurance. I always kind of refer to it when I'm speaking to organisations who don't purchase it or are a bit unaware of it as a cyber attack or cyber breach insurance. But it is there to protect against breaches or malicious cyber events. It covers against hackers stealing data and threatening to release it from organisations. Just get this in. It covers against hackers stealing data and demanding ransom or demanding a ransom to delete it. It can cover against certain fines and penalties that the regulator might enforce on a company as a result of a breach if they're legally insurable. It can cover it against viruses that potentially paralyse IT systems, as well as the loss of revenue whilst those IT systems are being restored. And it can cover against the accidental loss of data. So this can be costs arising from legal action by customers affected by a breach under the UK GDPR and fines levied by the Information Commissioner's Office. But arguably more important than that, it is actually more of a cyber security or cyber support as a service. A lot of organisations have reliance on external IT providers. Those themselves can be small and medium-sized enterprises as well. And generally, the focus that they will have will be on IT network support, getting organisations up and digitally architected correctly, making sure the systems talk to each other, make sure the business runs, so that operational part of IT. Security is very, very important, but there are security specialists, obviously. IT is a very, very broad field. So it is cyber support as a service, when organizations need it as well. So that's DFIR, or digital forensics and incident response experts, that will appear on site to support organizations through a breach, as well as that access to legal experts from a panel of solicitors. So making sure that logs are properly stored and correlated correctly, and making sure that digital forensics are kept and then presented later down the line if they're needed as part of some kind of legal proceedings. Also supporting with ransomware groups. We'll get into first-party covers in a second, but actually negotiating the fees to bring down potential ransom that might be levied on an organization. It's supporting all of those different types of areas. Insurance or cyber insurance policies generally have 4 top line heads of cover. The first 2 are kind of joined together. So that's incident response and cyber data loss or first party loss. There's also cyber liability or third party losses. And then additionally is something called cyber crime. I'll go through more of those. I'll go through in depth for each particular area. But breach response is like your emergency plumber. If you've got a leak in your home, it's something to get there and sort the fix out straight away. Oh, let me just jump back. That's getting there on site and supporting the organization. First party is after that initial response, what kind of damage is actually left to sort out. So that's things like IT and systems and data, cyber extortion, potential business interruption. Your third party losses are things that impact obviously third parties. So it can be data privacy and confidentiality, might be external network security if you have connections into other organizations, etc., etc. And then finally, external cybercrime, that is generally funds transfer fraud and social engineering fraud, or losses arising from those particular types of attacks. So let's jump into first party. So first party is broken down into these core elements. So things like forensic investigations, and that covers the costs to find out effectively what's happened, what type of data was breached, and who potentially obtained that data. Assistance or IT assistance is efforts to contain that breach, maybe repair the issue that's actually been discovered, get the organization back up and running. This might be restoring key files from various backups and removal of any kind of malware or lingering persistence in that particular system. As I mentioned, legal costs, it can be very, very expensive. The cost of overseeing that breach is covered by a cyber insurance policy, as well as the legal professional privilege and guidance on those regulatory requirements that will then be imposed upon the organization following a potentially damaging breach. Got PR and crisis management, so the mishandling of a breach can actually put insured brand at risk. It might lose a lot of trust with its consumers and its core customer base. So consultants are brought in to manage the communications and the strategy to try and mitigate any negative press. If there is a large kind of widespread breach of personally identifiable information, then data subject notifications can be expensive if you have to get lots of communications out. And this area covers the cost of notifying those impacted individuals following a breach of this personal information. This could be drafting letters, emails, or even the creation of a dedicated site to notify the affected individuals and manage that process through. If you have suffered a breach of personally identifiable information, sometimes you're going to offer out like Experian identity service providers, something to make sure that there's some sort of credit monitoring on those externally breached personally identifiable information packages. So making sure that if there is something additional to that, if there's some sensitive data, if there's some banking or financial information, that there's a reduced kind of threat from identity fraud and theft. So they'll be notified if their information is being used externally as well. So paying for that service for the data subjects as well. And then finally, call management. So setting up a call center or actually managing the fallout from the breach and having some dedicated resource where people can call in, data subjects can call in and say what's going on with my particular case. So it covers quite a broad array of potential losses. A very quick claims incident. I'm just going to do this for each section we're going through as well, just to make sure that it sort of brings it to life. So in this incident, a manufacturer of bespoke trailers was the victim of a ransomware attack. Their systems were locked, sorry, and they received a ransomware demand. They couldn't access any of the CAD designs or computer-assisted designs, and it did have the potential to effectively stop trading altogether. They decided initially to use their own IT forensics team for fear of giving access to their bespoke designs to an external customer, but they were actually unable to decrypt their systems initially. Once they'd notified Aviva, the IT panel that we appoint and the vendors that we work with stepped in and resolved this issue, but the delay in coming to Aviva cost the business an additional £50,000 to recover from the attack. So as part of our sort of statement of fact, we ask if there is a ransomware attack of any kind, or if there is some kind of data breach that has happened, if there's an incident that is spotted by the organisation, they do notify straight away so we can get the right teams and the specialist teams on site and supporting the business as soon as possible to mitigate any further losses. So that was incident response. This is first party, and as I said, it's kind of dealing after the initial response, it's dealing with any damage that is left. So IT systems and data, this is to reinstate and recreate and restore data, software or websites, and repair and replace damaged computer equipment following any kind of virus, any kind of external hacking attempts or bricking, and any kind of distributed denial and of service attacks. So it's getting the business back up to as it was before. We also mentioned cyber extortion. So this is effectively ransomware, but this is the overall expenses that are incurred to respond to, a compromise of network data, and this includes ransomware payments. How it works, once you've got an appointed ransomware negotiator, Aviva, if there was a payment of say 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds as part of this ransom, the payment will go directly to the insured to then deal with the negotiations. So Aviva don't pay out, or insurance companies don't pay out directly to hacking groups to get the data back or to get the system back up and running. But there is that process to support businesses if that does happen. And then finally, business interruption. So the loss of revenue and additional increased cost of working, including loss of future customers due to reputational damage. So this is all included and covered as part of an insurance policy. As I said, bear with me on some of these transitions. Additionally to that, the kind of cost and the business interruption element extends to outsourced service providers. So interruption to contracted providers of IT or data hosting or data processing services. And there are also kind of sublimits and covers for system failure. So loss of income and any sort of additional expenses incurred as a result of unintentional or unplanned malfunction or outage of any computer equipment. And this standard in our policy is up to about £25,000 and can be increased. On top of these two, you can get specialist heads of cover for manufacturing or other industrial processes. So if there are specialist industrial control systems or SCADA systems that organizations are looking for, again, we can incorporate these into the policy as a result of any kind of system failure or hacking and malware release. So again, just a couple of claims examples. We'll start with the bottom one, actually. I don't know if a few years ago, I think it was 2016, on Transport for London across the Tube network for a Saturday morning, there was a system glitch. So there was an outage, and it cost Transport for London £250,000 just for that Saturday morning in lost revenue and in loss of earnings. And that was just one Saturday morning. Obviously, a large organization with lots of kind of revenue points and lots of transactions happening. But that in that particular system, if they were covered by cyber insurance, it would be covered under the business interruption element. And that top element, so an employee of a technology company operating across a few different sites received an email from a known trusted business. The email contained an attachment which they opened. Malware was kind of foisted onto the insurance network, and it impacted servers and workstations across pretty much every location. The total cost to return the business back up and running was about £15,000. So this included IT specialists to investigate, contain and repair the damage. So it can come in handy when something does happen to get the organisation back up and running as soon as possible and having that number to call. The third party elements, or looking kind of beyond the first party organization and how it's immediately affected, these are the kind of pieces of coverage that we would look at. So data privacy and confidentiality is any action brought by data subjects who are impacted by a data incident. So this can include lawsuits for misuse of information and breach of confidence. Regulatory fines and penalties. So regulatory action that's taken on the back of it, it will cover defence costs in dealing with the regulatory action, and it can be useful for covering fines and penalties where these are deemed to be insurable by law. We're still waiting for a case law to get into that. Network security. So if allegations of a virus being transmitted by the insured to somebody else, this again will cover defence costs and settlements that might happen around that. Multimedia. So if an insured uses an image on a website that they don't have rights to, or if there's additional slander that's brought against them, it can be useful for covering losses arising from that. And then the payment card industry, or PCI. So if there's an organization that uses a website that has lots of transactions going on, if they're a level 1, 2, 3, or 4 merchant, and if credit card data is breached and involved, there may be action brought against them from the PCI. And again, the insurance policy will deal with the response and liability from that element. So a couple of claims examples. So multimedia liability: an employee makes a defamatory statement about a supplier on their business Twitter account, and the supplier happens to see this and can sue the employer for defamation. The middle one, the loss of confidential commercial data. If an employee was to accidentally email the price list of an existing supplier to another rival supplier, once in the possession of the list, the rival could use this to gain a competitive advantage by undercutting the existing supplier's prices, and the original supplier could bring legal proceedings against the insured. Again, that is covered by cyber insurance. And then the top one, loss of personal data. A hacker compromises something like the insured's external system and accesses private email addresses of their customers. The business discovers this breach, closes down the website, and notifies customers, and the costs arising from that. So they're 3 top line claims examples. Let's take a look at. And finally, cybercrime is an additionally extended addendum to a core insurance policy. And these are the elements that you're covering off. So if we start at the top one, so funds transfer fraud, and electronic institutions to a bank to make a payment claiming to be sent by the insured, but which were in fact fraudulently sent without the insured's knowledge or consent, that's covered under a cybercrime addendum. Social engineering fraud, so attackers deceiving employees and tricking them into taking some action by impersonating the email account holder. So if a mailbox is taken over and somebody manages to send an email across to the CFO or a finance director asking them to pay an authorized invoice, or an invoice with changed bank account details under a cybercrime policy, that would be covered under that. The unauthorized use of computer equipment, so business email compromise allows criminals to intercept legitimately and change the information in a genuine email thread. Again, that's also covered. Telecommunications fraud is attackers hacking into a company's phone system and racking up large telephone bills. So it's slightly less common, but calling very, very expensive numbers, or calling numbers that they own the billing rights to, and then billing the organization for thousands of pounds worth of fraudulent calls, that is also covered. And then also theft of personal money due to unauthorized access to the corporation's network. Just a quick claims example as well. So a member of staff in the accounts department within a business receives an email that appears to be from the CEO requesting a large transfer of funds to a supplier. This has also happened to me when I worked at a small credit insurance brokerage. I was sat around a table, and there were 3 of us in the business. There was the kind of CEO and founder in front of me, and the finance department to my left, and I was an account handler. And the CEO / founder got an email purporting to be from the finance director, and he just asked him, "Did you send me an email?" And he said no, and he was asking to pay an invoice to a legitimate supplier that we actually used. So I saw that firsthand, and the kind of losses that can arise from that are significant. But in this example, this email is due to a missed payment. The CEO is on holiday. The email does look genuine, and it's even written in the way that the CEO would usually write an email. So the payment is made. However, upon further investigation, it's determined the email has not originated from the CEO's account, and the total loss to the insured was £65,000. But because of that insurance, it was covered. The final point I want to make, and a lot of organizations, I used to work in risk management specifically. A lot of organizations say, well, we have a pretty solid risk management approach. We make sure that we have multi-factor authentication across the board. All our staff are trained. We patch every 14 days. We've got a strong password policy. We've got a strong set of risk management controls around the business that we feel we're secure against. And that is, object number one, that is have a strong backbone, and that is, excellent. Unfortunately, it is quite literally impossible to mitigate away all of the risk. You can have absolutely everything in situ for cyber risk management or for a cyber security approach. You can pay hundreds of thousands of pounds in endpoint detection and response fees and managed detection and response and security operations centers and the works. And all it takes is some kind of zero-day vulnerability in one of your externally facing systems and in some infrastructure somewhere, and for a hacker to pick up on it and bypass all of that good work that you've done. Or it takes just one erroneous employee clicking on something, not in a malicious way, just making, opening an attachment or something like that received from a proper organization that was purporting to be a proper organization, and your kind of external shell, your solid risk management base is then compromised. So just take this into example. If you have about £2 million of exposure, this is just a very, very broad example, and you don't do anything. So the potential loss to the business could be, say, £2 million if there was to be a particularly damaging cyber attack. You could spend about £10,000 on the risk management controls I mentioned before and bring it down by about £500,000 in terms of the overall exposure. So you've spent £10,000, you've brought the overall exposure to the organization down to 1.5 million, and that is a really good return on investment. If you purchase another £1 million of cover from an insurance policy, you can bring that exposure level down again, and sometimes it is far less expensive than investing in a full managed detection and response platform. The other thing to think about is, if something does happen, what are the potential costs of getting back up and running? The big kind of four accounting, or the old accounting firms, the consultancy firms, can charge upwards of £2,000, £2,500, £3,000 per day to support an organization through a breach. So if it takes you 10 days to recover, it can be very expensive. Whereas the coverage element from an insurance policy is much more bang for your buck, and you get quite a few different services aligned with it. So as well as the financial element of an insurance policy, you've also got the cybersecurity as a service element as well. And that's everything from me, guys. That is cyber insurance, or what to look for in a nutshell. I've put my information up on there. If you do have any questions, then do let me know. I'm always more than happy to answer. I've got my telephone number up there as well. But that's everything from me, and thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, John. That was absolutely fascinating. And I'm just going through the questions in the chat, and if I sort of start at the top and work down, there's a question from Mark. Is the incident response team available 24/7?
Yes. So once in, and this again, I'm speaking from Aviva experience. So in our policies, it's a 24/7 helpline. If you call it, someone will pick up, and effectively the clock starts ticking. If it turns out that it's not actually a breach, or there's some, you're worried and you call the number and now you're worried about, oh, I've got to pay an excess, or they're going to charge me for XYZ, and the premiums should go up. If it turns out it's not a breach, and it only takes an hour to figure that out, there won't be any additional cost. So you can call the number, and you should call the number if you do think something's happened. If something hasn't happened, you won't be charged for sort of wasting time, if you like. It's best that you call the number.
Yeah, that's great. There's also more of I suppose, a statement from Tim. And he says, "Hi, Ross and everyone." I'm assuming that includes you, John. This is a really long overdue area of growth and interest for SMEs. So that's gone down really well this morning. So, thanks for that. And he also makes mention that it's not just Aviva who provides cyber insurance, but I know you made a comment about that at the start of the
No, there are lots of providers. I'm just obviously talking from the Aviva angle, but yeah, one of the things we've sort of to double down on that SME point. Aviva have brought to market something called Aviva Respond, which focuses primarily on the first party and incident response elements. So it's a much cheaper product. One of the barriers to entry a lot of organizations have is the cost of cyber insurance. Our minimum premiums for cyber respond are £50. So its cover starts from £50 for organizations plus insurance premium tax. For the larger products, which includes everything, including cybercrime, minimum premiums start from £200. So we've really tried to work on a product that is matching up with the requirements for SMEs, but also being cost effective as well.
And that's really interesting, actually, John, because I guess it's probably a bar to a lot of companies, really almost from the outset thinking, well, it's going to be far too expensive and I can't afford it. But actually, you've just kind of laid that particular ghost to rest. So really grateful for that. There's another question from Dave. Says, hi, this morning. He's got to finish a report ready for a council meeting on cyber insurance policy. He's got quotes from CFC and Coalition to compare. Can you advise on the main things I should consider with policies from these providers?
It would be main things to compare. So you've got to obviously look at your sublimits, making sure that the sublimits that they're providing for things like extortion payments are enough, or they're at the limit that you've purchased. So if it's £1 million that you've got, you want to make sure that the extortion payments are also up to £1 million. Policy wordings as well can be slightly different, making sure that if you are a manufacturer, that you've got specific manufacturing addendums that are required. If you have quite a lot of staff that process payments as well, making sure that internally you're making sure that you abide by your own internal risk management procedures and rules, but also just double checking if there are any requirements that the insurance company are making on you that you are 100% compliant with it. We have a statement of fact that says, you have to have a firewall, you have to have antivirus, certain things like that. So just double checking that the things they're asking you to do are the things that you're doing as well. And I'd also add that they should come and get a quote from Aviva too.
Yeah, obviously. Right, where are we? Yeah, there's a question here from Helen. Is it possible to have some of these examples in writing after the presentation, because you'd like to assess each risk? I think it's probably worth saying now, obviously we've recorded this and we will send the webinar out to everybody who's attended this morning, and indeed those who initially booked and for whatever reason couldn't make it. So yeah, that's
and I'll just add to that as well, Ross. I've got a full playbook as well with claims examples that we have, real world case scenarios with anonymized information that I can send to you to send on to everybody as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I personally would find that very valuable as well, James. So I'm really grateful. Right, where are we? I think that's probably, and we're just about out of time.
Ross, I have a question, please, when you're ready.
Yes, yeah, please do, Michael. Go ahead.
Thank you. John, one of the questions we're asked, particularly with the social engineering fraud by clients,
yes,
how quickly does the insurer pay out, particularly if we're talking of a serious amount of money? Are we able to say, this is a plug for Aviva, of course, apologies there to everyone, that you would reckon to pay out within, say, 7 days or 24 hours or 3 years? What's the situation here?
So once we've been notified of a claim, and we've got internal claims handlers, our head of claims, George Thomas, kind of oversees everything. We also use an external company called Sedgwicks, who we work in partnership with to work through the volume of claims that we get. Once the investigation has been made and there's kind of proof that that payment has been erroneously made and the organisation has provided everything that the claims handlers asked, the payment is usually pretty swift. And once we've got confirmation, I can't give you an exact time, but I can go and ask George and say, in this example, how long would it take, or what would be the trigger for payment? What I do know is if on slightly larger cases, we believe that say they've got £1 million of cover and we think that the response costs might actually go through this, so it might be 1.2 million, we will just pay the £1 million out to the organisation and say, there's the payment, here are the providers that we use and we can help you with that, but here is the actual money to go and work through that. So that payment is made pretty much straight away once we've calculated the potential costs and made sure that everything's okay. But what I can do is go and get the kind of timeline for you and get that back to you if that's okay.
I think that's useful for telling
Yeah.
particularly SMEs and even the larger companies,
Yeah.
you're not going to be bankrupted whilst the process is taking place.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you are with an A-rated underwriter,
Of course. Yeah.
and there is going to be payment promptly.
Yes. Yeah.
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 Well, I'm afraid, Michael, that was a really good question. Thank you very much indeed. And we're going to have to draw it to a close now because we are going over time. For those of you who have asked questions that I haven't managed to ask on air, I've saved the chat. So what I'll endeavour to do is get them over to John if you're okay with that, and try and answer them individually. So it just remains to say thanks once again to John. I think you've really opened up something that was a bit of a sort of a dark area for a lot of us. So really, really grateful for your input, and thank you so much for your time coming this morning. And it just remains to say thank you to everybody who's attended, and stay safe online. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Take care.